So I'm going to be going over some basic postures with you today, and I'll start by breaking down in very slow motion the anatomy of a sun salutation. So let's start by rolling back our shoulders, opening up our hands, staying really strong in the core, lifting your heart, and check your feet. Let's place those feet together, toes and heels. And this is where we find ourselves in mountain pose or Tadasana. Some yoga traditions prefer something called Samasthiti, standing pose, and that's where you would just place your hands, palms to your body. That's the main difference between Samasthiti and Tadasana. They are both standing poses. So when we inhale, we lift our hands up. Option to take a little bit of a back bend for our upward salute, Urdhva Hastasana. And when we exhale, we will find ourselves coming into a forward fold. If your fingers don't touch the ground, don't worry. You can always place your fingers on your thighs, on your shins, or if you have a block, this is a great use of blocks. Just coming into whatever variation of forward fold works for you. You can always also just hang over with your arms free, Uttanasana, standing forward fold. This is usually the exhale portion of your sun salutation. For the next inhale of a sun salutation, we come into Ardha Uttanasana, half standing forward fold. I always say look up at the horizon. You can place your hands on your shins or your thighs. Let's go ahead and put our hands on the floor. Walk those feet back. We find ourselves in everyone's favorite plank pose, Phalakasana. Option to place the knees on the floor, or option to curl those toes and come into a full plank, whichever one works for you. For Chaturanga, you want to slowly lower down on toes or knees. Elbows stay tight to the body. Core stays tight. It's like a slow reverse eccentric push-up. Uncurling those toes. Just a teeny push in the hands. We're going to come into baby Cobra, Ardha Bujangasana. You should be mostly using your lower back to push yourself up here. Theoretically, you should be able to take the weight out of your hands, so it's just a tiny little back bend. Now, if you press into your hands and lift your hips and knees off the ground, you are in an upward facing dog pose, Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. The main difference between Cobra and upward facing dog is lifting up the hips and knees. So here I'm making my best attempt at a full Cobra pose, Bujangasana. My hips are lifting slightly off the ground, so I'm going to abandon that and find myself into a nice downward facing dog. Now, if you can't lift yourself straight up from a plank or an upward facing dog into a down dog, you have the option to come to your hands and knees first, and then curl those toes under and push yourself up into a downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. In down dog, you might find that your heels like to come up off the ground. A lot of people have tight hamstrings and calves. This pose is really great for helping with that. So really make an effort to lower those heels as much as you can. They might not touch the ground today, that's okay. You're going to press against the floor, the mat, with your hands, keeping your shoulders away from your ears, thinking about keeping a nice straight spine, lifting those hips up, and also at the same time lowering the heels. It's a classic yoga pose. It looks so simple from the outside, but there's so many things going on that are invisible to the outside eye. There's also some nice variations here. We can take a three-legged dog pose, Ekapada Adho Mukha Svanasana. This is often used as a transition between poses in vinyasa classes, but it's also a great variation to just take on its own. So you just lift one leg up in the sky and you can play around with the movement a little bit. I always like to roll out my ankle a little, This is also a great place to open up the hip. Feel that stretch. We're going to bring our knees down to the floor, sinking those hips back over the heels. We find ourselves in child's pose. The forehead should be directly on the floor. Arms can be in front or they can be by your sides. This is a real tight little posture. It's great for stretching out your lower back. It's also super restorative and restful, both physically and mentally. So always remember, child's pose will always be there for you. Coming up to our hands and knees, we find ourselves in tabletop Bharmasana. We're going to use this to do some cat and cow poses. So for cat pose, I'm going to round my spine and let my head and my hips come closer to the earth. And for cow pose, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to arch my spine and let my head and my hips rise up to the sky. And oftentimes in a vinyasa class, a teacher will have you cycle through these with your breath. So you inhale into cow pose, lift the hips and head. Exhale into cat pose, rounding that spine, dropping the hips and head. Inhale for cow. Exhale for cat. Let's curl those toes again, find ourselves back into a downward facing dog. And I'm going to lower down onto my elbows for something called Dolphin pose. Ardha, Pincha, Mayurasana. This is really great for building strength in the shoulders to help you prepare for an eventual forearm stand, but it's also just a super variation on down dog, especially if you have any issues with your wrists. This can be an option instead of coming up to a traditional downward facing dog. Let's come back up to our hands and then walk our feet forward. I'm going to show you a couple of standing poses. Inhale to rise up. Exhale to find your way back to standing. Let's step our feet wide on the mat and I will be your mirror for the next few poses. So you're going to take your left toes and you're going to turn them straight to the left. You're going to take the right foot and put it at a slight diagonal. And your heels should be more or less in line with one another, but you want to have a stable base. So if you feel wobbly, move your feet around and make sure you've got a nice stable base. Arms to a T. And you're going to reach for something really far away with that left hand. Reach, 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 reach. Till you can't reach anymore. And then you're going to drop that left hand down. Your left hand might not reach your ankle or your foot. You might have to place it on your shin, maybe your thigh. By the way, this is triangle pose, Trikonasana. Or if you have a block, this is another great place to use a block. And your right hand is going to be directly up in the sky. The palm is facing the same direction as the front of your body. So don't be turning your hand around to try and face forward or backward. It should just be straight forward and your eyes are looking up at that raised hand. And when we come to rise up, you want to remember to put a little bend in that front knee, your left knee, and inhale to rise up. It's always good to inhale when you're rising up. It gives you a little bit of core power. Same thing other side, taking those right toes straight to the right, left toes diagonal. You're going to reach for something far away with your right hand. Reach, 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 reach. And then let that hand drop down to whatever position works for you. Shin, thigh, block, ankle, foot. Your left hand is straight up in the sky, and you're looking up at your palm. If you can't see your palm, your hand might be turned the wrong direction. So you should be able to sort of give me an invisible high five through the screen. Again, remembering to put a little bend in that leg and an inhale to rise up. We're going to bring our feet facing forward and we're actually going to widen them just a teeny bit more. I'm going to take my left leg and bend it. I'm going to put my left elbow on my left leg, resting it there while I stretch my right arm along my ear for extended side angle pose, Utthita Parsvakonasana. You might also choose to put that lower hand on a block, or if you have the flexibility, you might choose to put it all the way on the floor. Some yoga disciplines prefer to put the hand in front of the foot, some prefer to put it behind the foot. Either way, you're still doing an extended side angle pose. You want to think about reaching that top arm as long as you can. I'm not doing a very good job of gluing my bicep to my ear, but that's sort of the idea. Let's rise up, turn those feet again. Same thing other side. Right elbow might come to right knee. Right hand might come to the floor. Thinking about bringing that left arm alongside the head. And maybe if it feels okay on the neck, you can turn and try and look up at that raised hand. It's a big stretch in your side body here. And remembering that as we rise up, we're going to take an inhale to give ourselves a little bit of core power. And then we can find ourselves back to standing. I'm going to show you a kind of a fun, slow sit. So just placing one foot across the other. And I like to put my hands in sort of a cross arm position. Slowly bending the knees, come down to the ground with as much control as you can. Finally finding our way to the seat. I'm going to do some seated postures here. First one I'm going to show you is a classic single-legged forward fold. So you're going to take your left leg and place it on the inside of your right thigh. It's called Janu Sirsasana. It translates to forehead to knee pose, so I'm going to show you what I mean by that, even if your forehead doesn't reach your knee. You may not be able to reach your foot, you can grab onto your shin, or if you have a strap or a belt or a necktie, you can use that to loop around your foot and pull yourself forward. As you fold forward, you want to think about having a straight back for as long as you can, but then the eventual goal is to put your forehead to your knee. So even if you're only doing it in your imagination, I want you to imagine that your forehead is touching your knee. If you can visualize it now, you might actually be able to do it later. I'm just relaxing into this posture. Remembering to use our breath for our movement. So to rise up, I'm going to take a nice inhale to bring myself up. Anything we do on one side, we do on the other side. So switching legs, extending your left leg out long, and stretching forward into whatever version of this posture works for you. And even when we seem like we're being still, we're still using our breath intentionally. So every inhale is a chance to get a little bit longer in your spine. Every exhale is a chance to get a little deeper in your stretch. So even when you're just sort of holding the pose, you're still in motion because you're always breathing, and that breath is intentional. Using our inhale to bring our body back up again. We're going to bring both legs out in front of us. Maybe wiggle out those toes just a little bit. Again, the strap might come in handy here. It's a little harder to reach forward over both feet than it is to reach forward over one leg. But we're going to go ahead and come into a double leg forward fold. I forgot to put the title up, but this is called Uttanasana, which means west side body stretch. The west side is the back side of your body. Inhaling to rise up. We're going to change position a little bit. We're going to bend these legs up. We're going to lift our hips up to the sky with the feet planted on the floor. Reverse tabletop, Ardha Purvottonasana. Or if you want, you can straighten those legs out, still keeping the hips lifted, for just a standard, regular Purvottonasana. I'm not sure what that's called in English, but it looks like this, Purvottonasana. Exhaling to lower yourself back down to the ground. Let's fold our legs up, and I'm going to show you some folded-legged sitting postures. Here's what we call a half lotus or an Ardha Padmasana. And I'm going to take my right leg and place it on top of my left. My right foot is on top of my left knee. My right knee is on top of my left foot. While we're here, let's stretch backward. Taking those hands behind us, reaching back with our head, puffing our chest out. And then we're going to exhale for a nice forward fold. Again, using our breath, inhaling to rise up, and we'll switch our legs. So now the left leg is going to come on top of the right leg. It's kind of crisscross applesauce, but a little bit different. So foot on top of knee, knee on top of foot, hands behind, drop head back, puff out that chest and really arch your back. And then on your exhale, you're going to come back forward, stretching those hands in front of you maybe, or maybe just leaning over your folded legs. Inhaling to come up. Let's come back to hands and knees. And rising up onto just our knees. Maybe the knees are wider than the feet. I actually like to make quite the tripod with my knees and feet for some stability. It's a personal preference. You're going to take your hands and put them in the back pocket of your jeans or your invisible back pocket. Reaching your head back, puffing your chest out, arching your back. We're coming into camel pose, Ustrasana. Maybe those hands walk down the backs of the thighs and you can reach back a little farther. Maybe those hands reach all the way back for your heels. Maybe they don't. Regardless, you're still doing camel pose and you are still getting a benefit out of it. Really opening up the front of the body. There's a big heart opener. Inhale to come up. Exhale to find your way back into child's pose. Sinking those hips over those heels. And no yoga practice is complete without the final pose. Coming to lying down, letting your feet fall open, letting your hands come open. We call this Savasana. It is your final relaxation pose. So let your breath come to a natural, comfortable pattern, closing your eyes, sealing in your practice, and just relaxing. Coming back into your body with your breath, I like to put my hand on my chest and my other hand on my belly to feel my breath. Maybe you like to wiggle your fingers and toes, scrunch up your face. When you're ready, you can turn yourself over to one side, coming into a little fetal position, sort of waking yourself up from the relaxation, and then pressing yourself up to sitting. And taking just one last moment to thank yourself for this time that you've taken to practice yoga. Have a beautiful day.